Deanne's Treasure Studio, where I read books not available on Audible. So today, I am reading to you Dagerheart, Core Rule Book. Introduction. Welcome to Dagerheart. Dagerheart is a collaborative fantasy role-playing game of incredible magic and heroic adventure. During your journeys, you may find yourself rubbing elbows with nobles to investigate and stop an assassination plot, delving into an ancient dungeon to prevent an apocalyptic creature from breaking free, sailing across a vast ocean to face a terrifying sea monster, or preventing a precious relic from falling into the hands of a dangerous enemy. No matter the adventure your party embarks upon, Dagerheart provides the tools to tell a story that is both heartfelt and epic. What is tabletop role-playing game? A tabletop role-playing game, or TTRPG, is an interactive storytelling experience where players take on the roles of characters within a shared world and collaborative to tell a story about those characters. Dagerheart is meant to be played by 3 to 6 people, known as your group or table, with one person taking on the role of the game master or GM, while the others each play a single character, referred to as a player character or PC. The GM facilitates the story that takes shape around the PCs. They introduce rewards, complications, and consequences to the narrative, embody the story's other characters, also known as non-player characters or NPCs, and help the story progress each time you play together. Like many role-playing games, Dagerheart uses dice to determine the outcomes of some uncertain events, providing an element of unpredictability to the results of your choices you make. Even so, the game embraces player agency and imagination. The type of character you choose to play and the decisions you make about their background and experiences will make your odds better or worse. On the dice rolls. What kind of role-playing game is Dagerheart? Dagerheart is a heroic narrative-focused experience that features combat as the prominent aspect of play. The system facilitates emotionally engaging, player-driven stories, punctuated by exciting battles and harrowing challenges. The game takes a fiction-first approach, encouraging players and DMs to act in good faith with one another and focus on the stories they're telling rather than the complexity of mechanics. The rules provide structure when it's unclear how actions or movements will resolve within the story. The system takes on a free-flowing approach to combat to avoid slowing down the game within a granular rounds, and it doesn't rely on grid movement for maps and minis. These aspects create a game that allows for the terrain and map building that the miniature-based systems are known for, while facilitating a streamlined narrative experience for players. If you're looking for a TTRPG that tells heroic fantasy stories with a modern approach to mechanics, focusing on both epic battles and emotionally narrative for the characters who fight in them, you've come to the right place. Dagerheart also utilizes a asymmetrical design, meaning that it plays differently for the GM than it does for the players. Players roll to 12-sided dice for the PC's standard action, including their attacks. The GM can make most moves without dice, but they roll a 20-sided dice for the adversity moves that requires a roll. The asymmetrical design is inherited to help all participants contribute to a memorable experience for everyone at the table. Heart of the game. In Dagerheart, you and your fellow players all take turns describing what your characters do. The GM determines the consequences for those actions, then guides the group into a collaboratively evolving narrative because of those consequences. When the rules call for it, or when the situation demands, you'll roll the dice to inform what happens next. Depending on the result of the roll, the events or the ongoing story will unfold in new and unexpected ways. There's no winning or losing in Dagerheart in the traditional gaming sense. The game is a collaborative storytelling experience where the goal is to play out an incredible story together. Even if the characters fail to achieve their goals right away, make big mistakes, or even die, they never lose. If a character dies, the party can look for a way to bring them back to life, or the player can make a new character for the party to meet along the journey. If the group fails to stop the villain from enacting a terrible plan, they might face consequences of that failure and try to make it right. Even if they succeed, they may triumphantly win the day, or they might anger or embolden a new, stronger enemy who retaliates. No matter what happens during the story, as long as you're working together to craft a narrative that is fun and exciting to everyone, you've won already. Page 6. Touchstones. Dagerheart derives inspiration from a variety of sources. Below is an abridged list of media the design team drew while crafting this game. TTRPGs, 13th Age from the Pelgrim Press, Apocalypse Keys from Evil Hat Productions, Apocalypse World from Lumpy Games, Blades in the Dark from Evil Hat Productions, City of Mist from Son of Oak Game Studio, Cortex Prime from Fathom Tabletop Cyber Systems from Mount Cook Games, Dishonored from Mythophases Entertainment, Dungeons and Dragons from Wizards of the Coast, Flea Mortals from MCD Productions, For the Queen of Darrington Press, Genesis from Fantasy Flight Games, Lady Blackbird from 1-7 Design, Mask, A New Generation from Magpie Games, Pathfinder from Piazzo Publishing, Shadow Run from Catalyst Games Game Labs, The Quiet Year from Buried Without Ceremony, Wild Sea from Mythopia Games Productions, Slug Blaster from Mythopia Games Publications. Books. Sabriel by Garth Nix, A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. Oh God, that was too long. The Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. Films and television. The Dragon Prince, The Legends of Vox Machina, The Lord of the Rings, The Witcher, Guardians of the Galaxy, Dark Crystal. Video games, Borderlands from Gearbox Software, Dragon Age Inquisition from BioWave, The Elder Scrolls series from Bethesda, Game Studios. Outsiders from People Can Fly. Special. Ooh, I can't even say special. Special appreciation. The Genesis system from Fantasy Flight Games and major inspiration from two-axis results of the duality die. Cyber Systems from Mount Cook Games and its GM intrusions paved the way for spreading fear to interpret a scene. Excuse me, I can't even read. Among the many things, Wizards of the Coast Dungeons and Dragons adventure disadvantaged system is particularly inspirational in the dice mechanics of this game. 13th Age from the Pelgrane Press developed backgrounds that heavily inspired the experience mechanic. Blades in the Dark from Evil Hat Productions and the Apocalypse World from the Lumpy Games helped to shape the narrative flow of the game, and their playbooks inspired a lot of the character development sheet. The Wild Sea from Mythopia Games Productions and its Phenomenon section on Reaches provide inspiration for the campaign frames a section of this book. The design of the Wizards of the Coast Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition and the monster design of Flea Mortals from the MCDM Productions inform the enemy types and the ways of managing minions. The Quiet Year from Buried Without Ceremony inspired the map building section of this book's campaign guidance. Apocalypse Keys from Evil Hat Productions form the sample section 0. Core mechanics overview. The dice that players use in Dagerheart most commonly fall into two different categories: your duality dice and your damage dice. Your duality dice are two different colored 12-sided dice, or D12s, that represent hope and fear. These dice embody the fate of the world and its effect on the character's success. Your damage dice corresponds to the weapon or spell your character wields, expressing the deadliness of a successful attack. When you roll to see whether the character succeeds or fails at a task or a challenge, you roll your duality dice and take the sum of the results. Then add any bonuses your character has that apply to the action. If that total is equal to or higher than the difficulty set by the GM, your character succeeds. If it's lower, they fail. You'll have to tell the GM whether your hope or fear dice roll higher. As the situation around you changes based on the result, we'll discuss more in depth in the core mechanics section 2. Sessions and campaigns. When the GM and players gather to play Dagerheart, that game is called a session. Each session is a small story, and if the group plays more sessions, those small stories become part of a larger narrative known as a campaign. Larger campaigns may be broken into arcs, multiple sessions collectively focused on a specific part of the story. If overthrowing a corrupt ruler is a campaign, recruiting allies from the neighboring kingdom is an arc within the campaign. Dagerheart is built to accommodate many types of stories. Your group might enjoy playing an open-ended campaign that lasts months, meeting every week to continue your character stories indefinitely. Or you could designate a set of number sessions and play with a definite end point. Your group might enjoy a story session, short 10-session romp, with a party characters before making new ones. Or you may only want to play one session known as a one-shot. All of those options are wonderful ways to play. Do what works best for your group. And I'm going to add this part. What makes you happy? Page 7. The Golden Rule. The most important rule of Dagerheart is to make the game your own. The rules included in this book are designed to help you enjoy the experience at the table, but everyone has a different approach to interpreting rules and telling stories. The rules should never get in the way of the story you want to tell, the characters you want to play, or the adventures you want to have. As long as your group agrees, everything can be adjusted to fit your play style. If there's a rule you'd rather ignore or modify, feel free to implement any changes within the table's consent. Rules over rules. While playing Dagerheart, the GM and players should always prioritize rules over rules. This book offers answers for many questions your table may have about the game, but it won't answer all of them. When you're in doubt about how the rules apply, the GM should make a ruling that aligns with the narrative. For example, Dagerheart has a weapon called a grappler that lets you pull a target close to you. If you try to use it to pull an entire castle, the weapon text doesn't forbid you from doing that, but it doesn't make sense within the narrative. Instead, the GM might rule that you pull a few bricks out or yourself towards the castle instead. Oh, it says wall, towards the wall instead. Similarly, if your character does something that would logically result in an immediately death, such as diving into an active volcano without protection, you might not get to make any of the Dagerheart's death moves, which normally give you control of your character's fate in the final moments. This kind of consequence should be made clear before the action is completed, and it should always follow the logic of the world. As a narrative-focused game, Dagerheart is not a place where technical or out-of-context interpretations of the rules are encouraged. Everything should flow back and forth to fiction, and the GM has the authority and responsibility to make rulings about how rules are applied to underscore that fiction. Using this book, the Dagerheart CoreRules is divided into 5 chapters. Chapter 1, Preparing for Adventure. This chapter covers everything you need to know to make a character in the Dagerheart system. Chapter 2, Playing an Adventure. This chapter details the core game mechanics you'll need to play a session, as well as how to level your character multi-class to access new domains and use special equipment you might discover during play. Chapter 3, Running an Adventure. This chapter is specifically for the GM, giving you the tools you'll need to run sessions and campaigns. In addition to detailing the core GM mechanics, this chapter guides you on using safety tools, running session 0, customizing campaign maps, planning story arcs, and more. Chapter 4, Adversaries and Environments. This chapter provides rules and stat blocks for filling your world with challenging adversaries and dynamic environments. You can use the pragmatic advisor, the pre-generation, I can't read, apparently, the pre-generated advisory and environment stat blocks, or follow the chapter's guidance to create your own. Chapter 5, Campaign Frames. This chapter provides campaign frame options you can use to structure long-term play. Appendix. Lastly, this is where domain card text, character sheets, and character guides, maps, and all the other reference documentation for the game can be found. Page 8. What do you need to play? Most of the tools required to play a session of Dagerheart are included within this book, but there are a few additional components you'll need to gather before you begin. 2 to 5 players. Dagerheart runs best with 2 to 5 players who are excited to collaborate and build a story together. If you're playing a PC, your responsibility is to adapt the mentality of your character and decide what they do. The GM will present problems and obstacles, and you'll figure out how to tackle those challenges in a way that makes the game most interesting. As a player, it's your job to shape your character's story through the choices you make and to spotlight the other characters as they too grow in this journey. A game master. If you're taking on the role of the GM, you'll be playing the world as it responds to the PC's actions. This means you'll set the exciting scene for the characters to manage the flow of the story and play any NPCs, including the adversaries characters that will face. You'll also ask the players questions that drive the narrative forward. Often, you'll be the one who knows the rules and can answer questions about mechanics during play. If the judgment needs to be made during the session about the rule of mechanics that's not in the rulebook, you'll be the one to make the decision. As a GM, it's important to remember that you're not an antagonistic force against the player. Though you're the one introducing the dangers and complications in a scene, the thrilling challenges you'll provide are meant to let the players showcase their character's strength and face their character's flaws. To be a fan of the characters of the collaborator with the other players at your table. Game dice. Dagerheart uses full suit of polyhedral dice, D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, D20, and D100. When referring to the quality of dice beyond a single dice, the game indicates how many of and which kind of dice, as 2d6s, 2 6-sided dice, or 3d8, 3 8-sided dice. Players will need 2 d12s of different colors, your duality dice, and at least one set of the polyhedral dice to share amongst the table. You may find it easier for each person to have their own set. As your player levels up, you'll be rolling more dice to represent those achievements, so it may be helpful to bring another set or two. The GM will also need their own set of dice to run adversaries. Tokens. Character tokens are small objects that represent the look and the feel of your character. Gather about 7 tokens per player to start. You'll need more as your character levels up. While the amount varies depending on the character's build, you likely won't need more than 15 tokens at level 10. As you play the game, you'll use these tokens to help you track several things. When you roll dice, you'll add tokens to help you easily count the modifiers on the roll. Use certain features. You might be required to place tokens on the card or your character sheet. These tokens not only make your rolls easier to resolve, but they are provided as an opportunity to further express the style and color palette of your character. You can use any small objects, plastic, gems, pennies, buttons, but we recommend something no larger than a quarter that can sit on the table without rolling away. Ideally, each player's token should be visually distinct to avoid confusion. The GM can use tokens to track their accumulated fear and counters on adversary stat blocks. Game cards. Along with this rulebook, you also need the cards that come with the core set: Ancestry, Community, Subclass, and Domain cards. If you don't have a physical set of cards or need extra copies, you can download and print the cards at home. The Domain Cards reference section in the appendix also contains the text for cards from the core set, character sheets, and notes. The appendix contains a general character sheet and the guides you can use to build your characters. But we recommend using the class-specific character sheets from the www.daggerheart.com for best experience. The remainder of this rule book, you will assume that you're using the class-specific sheets. If you're using pencil and paper, you'll want to have these materials printed out. If you're using a digital version instead, ensure that you have a laptop or a tablet available to view and edit your character sheet and guide during the game. We also recommend paper and writing utensils or digital equivalent to record important details that the GM or other players share. Additional maps and miniatures. You can use maps and miniatures to represent the scenarios the players are facing, especially during battle, to more fully illustrate the scene rather than just relying on narrative and description. When drawing or building a map, the scale, distance, and details won't always be perfect, and that's okay. The maps and the miniatures should never limit your imagination. Only provide extra sporadical context so everyone can picture the scene clearly. Page 9. Players' Principles. We recommend following these principles when engaging in Dagerheart as a player to get the most out of the system. Be a fan of your character and their journey. Spotlight your friends. Address the characters and address the players. Build the world together. Play to find out what happens. Hold on gently. Be a fan of your character and their journey. Find ways to show off what your character does best and what they do worst. Strive to make interesting choices. Learn more about who they are through play. Push your character story forward and let them grow with the fiction. Spotlight your friends. Look for opportunities to put other characters in the spotlight. Provide them openings to do what they do best. Ask them for help or offering freely and prompt them to share more of their thoughts and feelings. Address the characters and address the players. Speak to the other characters within the world of the fiction. Lean on the connections you build together. Ask them questions and create a story using your conversations as well as your actions. Speak to the other players outside of the fiction. Ask them what their character might do and what they want to see happen in the narrative. As you play, be considerate of their preferences and desires. Build the world together. In Dagerheart, each participant is a storyteller, not just the GM. The Dagerheart is a highly collaborative game that reaches its greatest potential when every player, including the GM, is working together. This means actively advocating for the story beats you want to see, offering suggestions to enrich the arcs of the other players' characters, creating parts of the world within others at the table, and thinking deeply about your character's motivations. Play to find out what happens. Everything you do at the table should flow from the fiction. Listen to your fellow players and GM. Then react to what their characters say and do to discover the story together as you build on each other's creativity. If you roll the dice, let the results lead you through what happens next. Embrace your complications with the same vigor as you would celebrate your victories. Hold on gently. Improvisational storytelling isn't always perfect. That's okay. Holding on gently to the fiction enough that you don't lose the pieces that matter, but not so tightly that the narrative has no room to breathe. Let yourself make mistakes and make changes. Smooth the edges and shape them to fit the story. Even if the story beats don't go the way you expect, or a sudden twist changes you by surprise, trust the GM and follow players to all create something beautiful and memorable in the end. Following these principles will help guide you in telling exciting, unpredictable, and meaningful stories together at your table. A table for all. Dagerheart is a game for players of all races, ethnicities, genders, faiths, sexualities, and identities. It is the responsibility of each player in the game to ensure that the table you share is a place where everyone is empowered, respected, and safe. Because of the nature of the open-ended storytelling in role-playing games, it's responsible to touch up on topics that might be difficult or sensitive for some players. Subject matter that might just be imaginary scenario for you could bring up a real-life topic that is personal or uncomfortable for someone else. When you gather to play for the first time, make sure that you talk about what kind of experience you're looking into having and to bring up any themes or topics you'd like to avoid. Everyone should abide by the social content and add or modify it in any time as needed. The Session 0 and Saved Tools section in Chapter 3 represent resources you can use to help navigate difficult scenarios together. Thank you for your likes and subscriptions. I'd like to remind you that this is copyright material, so this content cannot be monetized. So your likes and thanks is all that I ask. This channel is to be helpful to those of you who need it. I am not a professional at reading or voice acting. I'm just a normal person who enjoys role-playing games, writing, art, and being helpful. And I do hope that this is helpful. Till next time.